Would you believe me if I said Denver got about a third of its annual rainfall in the last 3 days? It doesn't really matter if you believe me, it's true. DIA got 2.92 inches of rain yesterday alone, making yesterday Denver's wettest day in almost 10 years. Similar rainfall recorded downtown, if you're curious. Over the past 3 days, Denver's gotten nearly 4.5 inches, about 30% of our average rainfall for a whole year. There is still some relatively minor flooding across the metro area from Denver up to Brighton and Commerce City. Let's hear it, though, for Denver's flood mitigation infrastructure. I know that's the real sexy stuff that everybody's interested in, but it worked. The new stretch of I-70, it didn't turn into Struggle Lake like it did last summer when pumps in the underground portion failed. People had to be pulled out by firefighters last year. There's no such drama last night. All good. The folks at the Mile High Flood District told our Steve Stager that the hidden system kept problems from quite literally spilling over.
The modern flood infrastructure really doesn't look like infrastructure. It looks like nature, even though we're in a city.
Chances are you've taken a walk or a hike, or a bike ride maybe, along a floodplain and never really noticed it. Well, until you noticed it during yesterday's rain. I mean, look at the Cherry Creek bike path.
Probably 99% of the time, you get to enjoy being by the water, because everybody likes being by the water. But then it's also there to convey the floods.
Dave Skudas manages construction and infrastructure for the Mile High Flood District.
Although there's been a lot of rain, the intensity, generally speaking, hasn't been enough to cause a lot of problems.
He says what you saw yesterday was the system working as it's supposed to.
There are a lot of agencies like ours and local governments and with the state that spend a lot of time and money to make sure that when it does rain, there's really no story to tell.
In its 50 years, Skudas says the Mile High Flood District and other government agencies have invested about $1 billion in flood projects, a lot of that to prop up areas where they didn't plan a neighborhood for floodwaters.
Parts of the metro area that developed prior to the 1960s, 1970s often didn't develop with respect to flood risk because it just wasn't that well understood.
Those cases require costly and sometimes controversial projects. Think of the redesign of the City Park golf course, for example. Nowadays, neighborhoods are built with those green belts and waterways preserved to give rainwater room to roam.
Yeah, there's a day or two where we don't get to enjoy the open space and trails, but I think it's a good trade-off.
And now you know a bit more about our good friend infrastructure. You might be wondering what the Mile High Flood District does on a day like today. Skudas says this is when they test their modeling and their hydraulics to see where all the water from all flood projects are going and make sure it's going to the right place. That stuff is never 100% right. So now they can look, see where the water went, make any potential adjustments they need to make, and move on from there, Kyle.
A work-from-home throwback Steve Stager reminds us of the days of the old fireplace behind me. I'm not violating Steve's medical privacy. He's talked about this on social media. Coming back from a case of the Rona, how are you feeling?
Yeah, it's my last day of quarantine, and other than a little stuffy, I'm feeling a lot better. It did take a lot out of me. It took me 3 years, the end of the COVID emergency pandemic, to actually come down with this thing. It's still a beast. It still knocks you out, but I'm back at it.
3 years is an impressive stretch. Well, thanks for working from home. I do appreciate it. Thank you, Steve. Many of the migrants coming to Denver do not see this city as their final destination. Sheltering migrants long term is a lot more expensive for the city than just buying somebody a bus ticket for where they want to go. Since January, the city has paid for 4,100 bus tickets with the hopes of doubling or tripling the number of bus tickets the city is currently purchasing. Our Angeline McCall has been talking with the migrants as they come into town to just find out where they're headed.
This is a place people move through quickly. Eduardo arrived here in Denver early this morning. He's reuniting with his friend who had to take a different bus. For other early morning arrivals, Denver is just a stop on the journey. Duban worked small jobs while in El Paso to buy the bus tickets for his family.
Pues estaba trabajando los oficios varios, lo que saliera, haciendo aseo, soldando, poniendo techo.
At $90 a ticket, saving took more time than expected.
Pues, o sea, me pagaron por lo que trabajaba, pero no me pagaban lo que era, lo justo. Me estaban era explotando laboralmente, porque como uno es migrante, entonces creen que uno está necesitado, pues así, entonces lo llevo a trabajar y le pago lo que le dé la gana a ese hombre.
Here now, a place he hopes is more fair to him now that he has papers.
Atravesó 6 países para poder llegar, que venía uno corriendo, escondiéndose de la migración, los buses lo robaban, la gente lo robaba a uno. No, ya aquí está uno en los Estados Unidos.
After traveling 12 hours overnight,
Ay, Dios mío, qué frío, pues.
they'll wait here until they find a ride. Another bus, another group from El Paso.
18 días detenido y 3 días ya resolviendo el dinero para el pasaje y todo.
John crossed with his friends through a hole in the border wall before immigration detained them.
Creo que es una prisión o fea, porque por lo menos en celdas que eran para 90 personas nos metían 250 personas, dormíamos en el suelo. Con lo que nos abrigamos era un papel de plástico. En los 18 días que estuvimos solamente nos sacaron un día a ducharnos, pero creo que ellos estaban jugando con la psicología de nosotros para cometer el error y podernos devolver. Pero el trato fue feo, fue inhumano.
All this to make it here.
Estamos esperando que baje un poco la lluvia y...
They will wait out the rain
No, venimos esperando meses. Esperar 4 horas no es nada.
and then head to a shelter.
Nos dieron la oportunidad de darnos el permiso para poder transitar, ya que no nos les estamos escondiendo ni a migración, ni a policía, ni a ejército, ni a nadie. Ya aquí somos iguales como cualquier otro de aquí de los Estados Unidos. Ya.
Denver is a place migrants move through.
¡Sofía!
Some will stop, some will rest, some will stay.
Feliz, muy feliz. En realidad pues feliz porque ya se acabó la pesadilla.
No me dejes tirar.
Even if their journey isn't complete, they've already arrived.
Y sí estamos felices porque en particular todos venimos en una lucha diferente, pero venimos por el mismo camino y fue muy fuerte todo.
John went to the intake center the city runs. There he was able to receive a bus ticket. His plan is to leave Denver on Sunday. Denver Mayor Michael Hancock has said that the city's resources for migrants are at a breaking point. His office is considering cuts to services unless the Biden administration comes through with more funding. It appears that this is going to be a challenge that's going to continue for the next mayor come June. Both Mike Johnson and Kelly Brough say that Denver should remain a sanctuary city and not cooperate with immigration agents. In the 9 News questionnaire that we provided them earlier in the race, Johnson said if elected, he would try to pursue a regional approach to the issue and partner with other cities who could take in some of the arriving migrants. Johnston also said that Denver should prepare to provide jobs for migrants once they receive documentation. And Kelly Brough, for her part, supported an expedited system for getting the migrants to work while their asylum applications are pending. Right now, federal rules prohibit migrants from applying for work permits until 150 days after they apply for asylum. Johnston and Brough will discuss differences in their approaches on that topic and many others at our final mayoral debate next Tuesday, May 16th. I'll moderate along with Marshall Zellinger and Anusha Roy. That starts at 7 p.m. Tuesday night. You can watch on Channel 20 or stream it on 9 News Plus. The social worker charged with inventing a child abuse claim against a politician in Aurora is now accused of pulling another hoax, faking a brain tumor to avoid trial. Prosecutors are questioning whether Robin Niceta really is sick. Niceta is accused of calling a child abuse hotline to make false claims against Aurora City Councilwoman Danielle Jurinsky, all because Jurinsky was critical of Niceta's ex-partner, former Aurora Police Chief Vanessa Wilson. That trial was set to start this month, but defense attorneys raised questions about Niceta's competency to stand trial, and then they said that she couldn't travel here for a competency hearing due to a brain tumor. Prosecutors are now questioning medical records provided to the court and aired on CBS 4 Denver. Prosecutors say that there is no record of the oncology clinic or the doctor cited in Niceta's records. They also claim MRI images of her supposed tumor are just stock photos you can easily Google. A judge sided with prosecutors' motion and ordered Naceta to come up from New Mexico, where she's currently living, to show up for a court hearing next Monday, unless she can come up with verifiable medical records. It really is amazing to think about how eras of our lives are often marked by when beloved pets come along and when they leave us. Today marks a year since our Marshall Zellinger said goodbye to Kosher, that wonderful wiener dog that made so many appearances here on Next, especially during our work from home stretch. Kosher and Marshall got 17 years together. I shared earlier this week how I could not bring myself to think about adopting another dog after I lost Porter 3 years ago. He made a bunch of appearances on Next as well. That is until recently, convinced that my girls should grow up with a dog, and seeing how many surrendered dogs had filled Colorado shelters to capacity, we brought home Abby. She was coming from a shelter on the Eastern Plains. Saying goodbye to a pet you love is part of the bargain at the end of their life. It should not be something that families have to do along the way because of economic hardship. That's why this week's Word of Thanks microgiving campaign is supporting Colorado Pet Pantry. They offer free pet food to families who need it through more than 100 food banks across the state, with a special focus on rural areas. Because not only is surrendering a pet for financial reasons heartbreaking for a family, it's also a financial burden for shelters. It's expensive for them that they have to pay to rehome all these dogs and cats. And that's one reason why so many shelters are at capacity right now. Families doing economic surrenders. Scan the QR code on your screen or text the word thanks to 303-871-1491 to join me and a bunch of other Coloradans in donating to Colorado Pet Pantry. Since Wednesday night, you have raised more than $50,000. A lasting tribute to 2 Denver police officers lost, still remembered generations later.
We consider that a great honor for my grandfather.
Love the rain, could do without the bloom. Our favorite Friday question reminds us that after each storm, there's always something to celebrate. Next. It's been 105 years since 2 Denver police officers died of the Spanish flu. They were largely forgotten by history, but of course their families remembered their legacies. Now, more than a century later, those officers will be remembered for their service with a special tribute in Washington, D.C.
It breaks your heart when you find the numbers of officers who die in the line of duty. My name is Frank Queen. My grandfather was Frank Potestio. My mother named me after him. Frank was on the Denver police in 1918 when the Spanish flu hit, and he died from that. What's interesting as far as the police is they did not decide until last year to put the 2 officers who died of the flu on the list of fallen officers. And now we're so happy that in Washington, D.C. this week, they are going to be honored once more and put on the national monument. We consider that a great honor for my grandfather. This is the article of the patrolman who dies in the performance of his duties. Frank Potestio takes the flu while making bootleg raid, says his fellow officers. It's hard to go back to what people thought or did that long ago. Suffice to say, since he wasn't killed by gunfire or things along those lines, they may have just decided it didn't matter. And perhaps it took the more modern police department to realize that he still died as a result of being a police officer. He still died as a fallen officer. In our country, there's tens of thousands, millions perhaps, of people who have given their life for the good of the country. Police officers are generally a part of that. And we have a lot of angels amongst us.
Denver police officer Peter Walsh is also being added to the National Fallen Officer Memorial this weekend. He and Frank Potestio were hired on the same day, and they died of the flu just hours apart.
Are you drying out? That was a super soaker of a storm, 4.4 inches officially between Wednesday and Thursday into early this morning. Keep in mind our average for the entire month of May, a little over 2 inches. So maybe you're thinking, okay, we got to be in the top 5 wettest Mays on record. Nope, not the case. Even with that monster storm, a super soaker, we're actually sitting in 13th place right now. You have to go way back, 1876, when we saw about 8.5 inches. Tonight, Yes, maybe a little sliver of sunshine in the distance, but still plenty of clouds out there. We had a couple of isolated showers up in the high country areas, but wow, talk about a powder day, 5 to 10 inches stacking up out there. Stormy skies pushing off into Nebraska tonight. That's where they have the tornado watch. Severe thunderstorm warnings in place. For us, maybe a couple quick little showers here and there. That's going to be about it. 11 o'clock, the cloud cover with us, and that's the way we'll wake up tomorrow. Mix of sun and clouds for your Saturday. Definitely looks like a better day to get outside with Mom. By the afternoon, 4 or 5 o'clock, we'll be looking at rain and snowfall pushing into the high country just a little bit to make things wet. And then by Sunday, that's when we'll have a better shot at seeing some wet weather. 50s and 60s on deck for us as we look ahead toward your Saturday. And right now, 7-day forecast bringing us highs in the upper 50s. A good chance for rain on Sunday, Mother's Day, but the 70s are back next week.
A reminder that this week's rain brings the promise of a new season, fresh starts.
My good news is Clear Creek's up, spring is here.
We end the week the way we always do, with your good news. Next. What was the stormy week and all that rain to you? Our house is kind of a scramble to cover the perennials in the garden, and then it was just pure gratitude for all the water. For others, we know it meant ruined roofs and siding, smashed car windows. So for some perspective after a wild week, we headed down to a rushing Clear Creek to ask Coloradans about the headlines in their lives.
We're made of water. We are water. When I know that I could taste the water in the air after a rainstorm and feel it under my feet on a paddleboard, I'm just that much more in touch with my humanity. My good news is I'm alive right now. I'm celebrating my time on this planet with good water and amazing friends.
They're all my family. Woo! Direct family. Woo! My good news is I graduated.
My good news is I'm traveling in my van. Been traveling for several thousand miles for the past couple of weeks and met many wonderful people, especially here in Colorado.
My good news is I graduated yesterday from Colorado School of Mines with a master's in civil and environmental engineering. So.
And how does it feel?
Feels outstanding.
Good news for me is probably just hanging out with them. This is one of my first times trying boogie boarding and just being on the river. Yeah.
And how'd it go?
It was pretty tough. I started like seizing up, I don't know, but.
My good news is that this is Lobo, and he is a rescue looking for a forever home, and today he got to enjoy a fabulous hike with his foster siblings.
My family is here, and it's precious that they're all here. They all came for me, and I really appreciate it. I love you guys.
Always makes you smile. Feedback on a city with a truly crowded race for mayor, next. Terry writes, you thought it was funny Denver had 17 mayoral candidates. At last check, Toronto has 102. It's true. A Canadian Next would have spent months interviewing each of them about the race. And Michael says, when was the last time you wore the jacket? I know, just check your left sport coat inside pocket. Oh, you know, don't you? October 11.